Welcome to Elevating La Cultura podcast, a space where I talk with Latinas who are passionate about what they do and are willing to share their passion with others to change the narrative, especially for the next generation. Each season is centered around different topics, but all with the Latina perspective. This is season 3, focused on education. So vámonos, and let's get into it. Hola! Today's conversation is so good, and I've been wanting to get it out to the listeners since I recorded it. Veronica opened the Little Scholars Club, a daycare and learning center dedicated to provide children a safe and nurturing space where they can learn and develop the social, emotional, academic, and life skills needed for school preparedness. Veronica pivoted from being a teacher to open Little Scholars Club with her sisters. She's working towards shifting the idea of daycare in her community to something that is positive and beneficial for children. So, please enjoy our conversation. Hola! I am so excited to be with Veronica today. We connected through a previous podcast guest, Dr. Angie. She's on episode 16. But I love to reference like how connections happen because I always am fascinated and like really appreciative when like we can elevate each other and like cheer each other on and say like, oh, well, this is what I'm doing. And someone else says, oh, let me connect you with this person because I think they'd be great. I think that is a really encouraging thing to do, like especially as women, especially as Latinas. And living in Chicago, I've just really appreciated that that vibe that I get, that camaraderie, that like we're estamos echando porras, like our friends. So even though this is the first time that we are like meeting face to face, I am so appreciative of the connections that I've had through other guests and through my friends and my network. So I'm glad to introduce Veronica, and I'm excited for her to share her story. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hola, my name is Veronica Herrera-Lopez. I am currently the director at the Little Scholars Club, a learning center, as I like to call it, on south side of Chicago on 59th and Pulaski. I've been doing that for 11 years now. And prior to that, I was actually a teacher at Chicago Public Schools working with third graders, and I did a little bit of middle schoolers. So I've been in the education industry for a while. It doesn't get old for me. I'm passionate about it, and I'm so excited to be here to share my story.
Yeah, why don't you tell us like what led you to even entering the education space?
Oh man, you know, I'm the first of five children. So I think, naturally, when you are the first of five, you kind of are put in the role of teacher, like my mom and dad were trying to get by literally. And so I think that's kind of where it started. I remember playing with my siblings, and I was always the teacher. So that was the beginning, the beginning of, I think, playing that role. And then left high school. Well, I shouldn't say left high school. I attended Curie High School for 2 years and made a transition to the suburbs, and that was a it changed, I think, the way I saw things. I got there and people were already talking about what they wanted to do and where they were going to college. And here I was as a junior, not really have been not having those conversations at home. My parents are first, they were first generation immigrants here, so it happened that here I am junior year, and I'm wondering, what am I going to do? Graduate, and I think I didn't know much about what my options were, right? So I ended up somehow in college because I was like, well, I think this is what I'm supposed to do next. Did that for 2 years at a community college, and then transferred over to a 4-year university. And I think when I was there, I teaching is what I knew from role model, from teachers that had made an impact on me. Um, and I think because of the connections that I had had with some very important teachers in my path, and because, I probably, it was something I knew and knew I could do, that's what I chose to do. So it was, I think, the perfect um, combination for whom I was, right? So decided to go into teaching, and um, ended up working, left the suburbs and started in the city, ended up working in a community that was very close to my heart. And then really found, I feel like then I really found the true, um, my urgency to stay in education, and what made sense for me. That experience, my first years of teaching, taught me a lot. And being a teacher in a primarily Latino community, I think I saw, the need for our representation in the schools. And so, yeah, that's kind of 360, where I ended up as why I ended up as a teacher.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to the pressure of needing to know what you want to do so early in high school.
Yeah.
And like I kind of just felt like I was floating along, like say, okay, this is the next step. Okay, now I have to start applying. Okay, now I have to
Absolutely.
choose. Um, and it's a lot of pressure, especially if you're the oldest. I'm also the oldest. I'm the oldest of two, so it's like it's just
Okay.
my sister and I. Um, but yes,
Absolutely. And it was a foreign, we've talked about, I talk with friends all the time how it was, our parents didn't go through this. And unfortunately, in my education experience, I didn't have teachers asking me, like, what's, have you thought about doing this, or even having those conversations about the different, all these careers that are out there and the possibilities. So it was very daunting. I think even just the process of applying, I talk about how I was like, where am I gonna, so I'm done with high school, and my mom, thank God my mom and my dad were like, education is super important. And I was, it was a blessing in disguise, but I was also blessed to end up in a high school in the suburbs where everyone was talking about their path and everyone kind of had that figure out. So to go from, not having these conversations to really trying to figure out how to even navigate the system, like, I remember driving it, we were up in the western suburbs, and I remember driving and saying, oh, that's a university, maybe I can go and apply there. This was before we had all this access to, the internet. It was a little bit different. So I feel like it worked out for me. And I'm so grateful that I also had the drive and that I had the parents to kind of be like, we don't know this road, but you should definitely continue your education. So kind of figure it out, as you go. So it definitely was a whirlwind.
yeah, did you have a specific teacher or counselor that was really helping you through that?
You know, it's gonna sound so cliche, but I had two teachers that I think I would really, and made a big impact on me. The first one was, amazingly enough, my kindergarten teacher. And I remember I've written papers about, you go through education and you have to reflect all these things as for your, when I was in school. And I think this teacher just gave me so much love and saw me. I was a quiet girl. Um, and I remember working hard in her classroom, but I think mostly it was that she saw me, Veronica, and she made me feel special and she made me feel loved. And you hold on to that. here I am now, as a 40-year-old still thinking and being grateful for that. And the second one was a third grade teacher who, I was at a new school and I had transferred from a bilingual classroom to an all English classroom. And my English was probably still struggling a little bit, but again, it wasn't necessarily about what she did for me academically. I think it was what she did for me emotionally. She would embrace me, she would give me hugs. She actually kind of developed a little fighter in me, because she would see me and she would tell me, Veronica, you are so beautiful. And one day you will grow up, but you will work hard so that you don't have to depend on a man. And she would tell me, I mean, almost on the daily. And now I think back and I'm like, what that started doing something to the way that I was thinking, right? Like, I will grow up, I will be successful, I will have my own job, so that you don't depend on anyone, which I think is a very, very important lesson. But she would be the third teacher, the second teacher that I think just did so much for me emotionally. Um, and I am I mean, I, Karina, I think is within me where that if someone tells me you can't do it, I'm almost like, yes, I can. Like I'm going to try to do it. And so I had some of those teachers too, like a Latina moving into a mostly white high school. My junior year, there was a huge disparity between what I had been doing in my prior school to where I was at now. The rigor was ridiculously different. And here I had, like, I remember one teacher in particular that told me, it was a math teacher, and he was like, you're better off dropping my class. You're not going to make it. And I was, thank goodness, smart enough or had been empowered enough by other people in my life to realize there's something wrong with what this person is telling me, right? Like, instead of offering help and saying, hey, you're not doing too good in my class, you should probably seek some tutoring, or I'm here to help you out. It's like he's giving me this message of giving up. And so I think that those teachers, although are not good to have in your path, hopefully you find teachers that are encouraging you and really there to help you succeed. I think that teacher in particular, I was like, I will show you that I will pass you. I'm catching up, but I will pass your class. So the opposite also did happen, that fired that it ignited me basically to make sure I did what I needed to do on my own to make sure I could succeed as well.
I'm always shocked when teachers, or I hear stories of teachers not encouraging their students, but like doing the opposite. Like, isn't your role as a teacher to pour into the students, to encourage them, that even if they're struggling, like, help them out?
Right.
I'm always shocked to hear stories like
Yeah.
that. But I also am the same way. Like, if you tell me I cannot do it, I will find a way to prove you wrong.
Right. Right.
But I just think about the the people who don't have that,
Mhm.
like, aren't naturally inclined to say, like, oh, well, I'm going to prove you wrong, but will say, like, okay, maybe I can't do it. I think it's, and maybe teachers are trying to use that reverse psychology on people, but I think it's so dangerous to play
Yes,
around with it, because you don't know how that student is going to interpret it emotionally and mentally.
absolutely. And it's not the way that we want to support our students, right? You want to be mindful of the fact that you have all sorts of personalities in that classroom, and it's not exactly like what you said. It is very dangerous. It's not a, I would say it's inappropriate, right? To think that that's a strategy, um, because it does a lot of harm. And like, like I said, I was lucky that I had a very sound support system on my end, cheering me on a lot of the time, to know that there was something wrong with that. But imagine students that you know, we come from all different paths of life, right? And so that is not a way to be supportive. That is not a way to encourage. Um, so yeah, I unfortunately I think it happens, but we should strive for better, you know, and we shouldn't accept it as a way to encourage students. I think, you know.
Yeah, for sure. How did those experiences, like your influence by the teachers that you mentioned, then like impact you in the journey that you are on now, and like what you decided to specialize as far as education?
I think they are excellent reminders that in the classroom, you know, so often we think like you know, we worry so much about academics, right? Parents are constantly, I think that's a lot of the times our focus. And those early experiences are such of those teachers that stayed with me, um, are such a great reminder that there is so much more that goes on in a classroom than academics, right? You cannot, you need to build relationships with these students. They need to feel seen, they need to feel loved. That's what we are all seeking. And if we forget about that, then we can't really reach our potential with academics, right? So if you drive for just the academics and you're not forming these relationships, it's not going to go so well. You've got to build those relationships, I would say, first, even. And you will probably you will make bigger gains that way. And unfortunately, I think we forget that, you know, as parents. And sometimes I was faulty. Um, I went through that, you know, where I became so focused on gains of academic gains because of the pressure that you get as a teacher. You forget the impact that you have on a child emotionally, you know. You forget that they are little kids who are just trying to be in a happy place with someone that loves them, with someone that understands them. And so I think those teachers are a really good reminder of that kids need to be seen and feel loved, um, before anything. You know, I'm not saying forget the academics, but I am saying don't forget about that emotional component of it. And I think, you know, now I'm not in the public school sector, and part of me feels that it's because me as an adult did not get that fulfillment, that emotional fulfillment being in the public school sector, right? So you are it is a machine, and you are on the green on the daily, and it is a tough job. But it gets to the point sometimes where we forget. I felt like we were being pushed so hard. I couldn't do my job the best way that I knew I could. um which, you know, I ended up leaving, and ended up opening, little scholars club. And now more than ever, oh my goodness, now more than ever on the daily, it is the reminder that our little ones, so we have ages, I work with ages, 15 months to 5 year olds. And now we are also running an after school program through a sister company or business. And those children are, school age, but we all want the same thing. You know, they all want someone that will just embrace and that will make them feel seen, understood, um, before anything. You know, we can teach so much more when you have a classroom that just feels loved. And I know it sounds super maybe cheesy, but it's the truth. Especially right now with the pandemic and so much going on all around, like it's important to provide that space for them. And then I think that's my big goal.
Yeah, I after this past year, 2 year, almost 2 years, like I think the emotional connection with kids is like that much more important. Um, because like I think of the stress and anxiety that I've felt as an adult, and it's when this all started, it was so easy for me to forget about my kids. But I realize that they're going through the same pandemic, they hear us talking about what's going on and like the decisions that we have to make and shift. And it's eventually I was like, oh my goodness, I need to like actually talk through all of this with my kids and like make them feel okay, even if I don't know what's going on. Um, yeah, it took me a while, but I had to shift beyond the academics to just tapping into them emotionally.
Absolutely. It's so easy to forget, children are so resilient, and they don't have the emotional talent intelligence at times, depending on where they're at in their age, to be able to say, hey mommy, or I'm, teacher, I'm feeling really scared. But you start seeing it somehow. Behavior is communication. And I always tell parents, like, when you start seeing behavior that doesn't seem like your child, it's not that they're trying to purposely act out, or it's trying to tell you something. And yeah, it's been incredibly, I think it's been incredibly hard for everyone, and they are not the exception. So I'm happy that we were able to be there. We opened our doors soon after. They closed us down in March, and then opened our doors in back up in June, I want to say. And so we were able to have some kids back, of parents that were either essential workers or that just simply needed to work. Um, so I was happy to provide a safe space for them. And I was happy to provide some normalcy, with masks and everything. But I think they were happy to be able to have, to have that normalcy again, or at least to be around friends, you know, playing and learning together. So
Yeah.
it's been tough though.
Yeah, I can imagine. Why don't you walk us through how you started Little Scholars Club?
Yeah. So, you know, um, I taught for 8 years, and after maybe the sixth year, um, I believe I was a hardworking teacher. I was very devoted. I was young and wanted to make a difference, I think all the reasons why, if you're going to go into a teacher, going to teaching, this is what you want to do, right? And so I was really stressed though, and constantly just like it consumed my life. Because once you leave school, you have your certification, but learning to teach is an art. And early on, I realized, oof, I need more strategies or more tools in my toolbox. And I devoted really my first years of teaching to really trying to get better at it. And I was really, really lucky. I was incredibly lucky. And I am so grateful that I ended up in a school that was a smaller school with administration that really was invested in the kids. And honestly, it's like a dream. Like now I look back and I go back to those years and I think, God, I was just like so lucky, like here we are. We were starting off this school with all new staff. It was a tiny school in the Brighton Park area. And my administrators were like, we are going to give the best to our kids, basically, right? And so I was really motivated and really empowered to learn to get better. And I received a lot of support from my administration. 5 years down the line, I was feeling good, but feeling more stressed. And now it had consumed all my life. And my dad comes to me and says, "Girl, you are working too hard. Like at this rate, he's a business owner. And he's a very smart man. And he said, at this point, you should probably just open up your own little school." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, Dad, sure." And kept doing it for a little bit longer. But he literally would tell me all the time, "Veronica, ¿qué estás haciendo? Like, mejor abre tu propia escuela. Like, just open up your own school." And he planted that seed. After doing it for 8 years, I think I was maybe ready for a change in routine. I was still young and fearless. I didn't really realize I grew up, my parents opened up their business when I was an eighth grader. So I grew up working in the business. I grew up, with that in my life. And so therefore I think it desensitized me a little bit to the fact that opening a business is a big deal. Like, and it is a lot of work, right? So here I am in my 30s and I'm like, sure, why not? What do I have to lose? Like, just go for it. So that's how Little Scholars came to be. My father kind of planted the seed. He supported me. He was a part of my support system, and I did it along with two other sisters. And so it felt like a family project, which was a whole thing on its own. Working with family it has its dynamics. Um, but we started it and we've kept going. I feel like, Little Scholars is a project of love. Like, I I would always say, like, I think I've done it for so long because as a director, I am able to implement my vision for this space, that is dedicated to our students. And that has been incredibly, um, it's given me a lot of joy. I've enjoyed doing it. I think that, when we opened our doors, we wanted to give parents a solid option for early care, right? And in our community, early care is looked as in, like, like, it's not necessarily the thing that us as Latinos do. And we are in a primarily Latino neighborhood. So I went in being like, I want parents to invest in and see, I think, the benefit of having their child in an early learning experience to really, really, really set them up for success once they get into elementary schools. Being a third grade teacher, I saw a lot of, like, our learning gap. There's still a huge learning gap in our learning community, achievement gap, I should say, in our learning community. And I saw that firsthand as a teacher. And I think in my head, I was like, if we invest in the early years, which are so important, they're going to have the opportunity to be ready for when they get to kindergarten, with ahead of the game almost, right? So yeah, that's kind of like how Little Scholars came to be and why we're still there doing what we do.
That's amazing. I didn't know that you started this with your sisters. Do they still
Yeah.
work with you?
Yes, we are a trio and we are so um I love them. We've learned so much about each other and we do a good job. Like, I get a little, like, emotional about it, but like it's a lot of work. But I think what I've learned is we all have our strengths. Um it's not easy all the time, but we all have the same vision in mind, which is to provide an amazing space for our community and a space that we can be proud of and that parents can be like, you know feel comfortable and feel like they are making a good choice by, when they go to work, leaving their child with us, and can be sure that they're having fun and that they're learning and that they are being loved and that they will be ready for whatever comes next in their path. So yes, the three sister dynamic, it seems to work for us. We all have our strengths and we complement each other's weaknesses, and that's really, really important.
That's amazing. I always like I love to hear when businesses are built on like family, like you get to
Yeah.
work with your family. My father is an entrepreneur as well, and so the entrepreneurship path like was always an option, or like that's what I saw growing up. So it was
Mm-hmm.
like that's what I'm going to do one day. Um I didn't know what that would look like when I was younger, but I knew that it was possible.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, so how has the Little Scholars grown since you first opened? Like, what programs did you start with, and like, what do you offer now?
You know, when we started, um, goodness, I can remember when we first opened our doors, we were hoping for three classrooms. And, obviously the community has to learn about who you are, and you have to, I don't want to say prove yourself, but really show what you're about, right? What are you selling, and what are you really about? What's your vision, and what are, is it aligning with what your community needs? And so our first year was obviously a little rough, just like it is probably in most for most entrepreneurs when they're starting. We started with a toddler classroom and one pre-K classroom. Each classroom probably had about three students, and I think within the year we were able to grow pretty quickly. So right now we have three classrooms, our toddlers and twos programs, and two pre-K programs. And I think we're getting better at learning what how to reach out to the community, right? So we are Little Scholars is a it's a big family, the three sisters and then our teachers whom we love and adore and are an integral part of what we do. A lot of them have been with us for quite some time, which is not, what you typically see in the daycare industry. There is a lot of turnaround with that. But I think what we're at right now is offering more support to parents, um, and we're learning to navigate this idea, like learning to navigate how to really teach, not teach parents, but let parents know what we're doing, right? And changing that mindset behind the negative, I think, view that daycares have. And so all our efforts have been going towards that. And that's within Little Scholars. We've been able to now start a second business, which in retrospect, we talk about how it should have been called, the Little Scholars Art Studio, because literally our families, that's it's La Pali Art Studio, who is doing now, art classes for um, ages toddlers all the way up to age school students. But that's probably an extension. That is an extension of Little Scholars Club. We're seeing a lot of our old families who were with us through the daycare now enrolling their children in art programming because they know us and because they talk about how like the Herrera sisters are just invested in what they do. So I think they that trust goes a long way.
That's great. How have you like found the teachers that are part of the school?
Oh man, hiring is a difficult um, it's finding the perfect candidates for your team. But I will say that when I interview, I'm seeking for, it's like a thing you can't describe, but this love for wanting to not only learn, right? But also to work hard, because it's a demanding job. And we're not, our teachers at the center they are coming in with either an associate's and working towards another degree. And so I always tell them, like, once you become a part of our team, we are like family in the sense that we grow together, right? And I think that's how, I seek for those qualities that look like they might complement. You have to consider a lot of things, like who are they going to be working hand in hand with. So I'm looking for a personality that will complement that. But I think the reason why we talk about why they stay with at Little Scholars for so long, and they say, Ms. Vero, it's like a family here, and it's you feel supported, and you feel, like you girls, meaning the Herrera sisters, care. um and we do. I think that's the reason why it's I want to believe that it's a nice work culture. um but we're constantly learning together, and we care about each other. So yeah, I think, when I think about who I bring into my team, it's a journey. It's a journey. We continue to learn together. I've been teaching for, so long, and still, I'm learning. How do I become better at what I do? Um, so yeah, that's kind of what I think about. And I think the reason why they stayed with us for so long is because I want to believe they feel seen at Little Scholars, and they feel supported, and they feel like they are part of our family.
Oh, that's so beautiful because I think that it like extends. It's not only about like supporting the kids, but it's supporting like every single person that is part of this community because that's essentially like what you've built. It's not just a school, but it's a community where people can feel loved, appreciated, and when the adults feel that, like it's that much easier to have that flow to the
Yeah, the
kids.
trickle effect, absolutely. You know, I feel like I always say, I tell our teachers, we feel so lucky. And I do. I feel incredibly lucky, to have the team that I do. Um, we work well together. We just had our family picnic, our beginning of the year family picnic outing this weekend. And I stopped for a moment, and I told one of our teachers, I said, thank you so much. I am so grateful. When I have my team, I know, like, we are now at the point where, I don't have to say, like, hey, can you help? They just, we kind of know, right? So I said, I feel like I don't have to think about everything, when I have my team behind me, because we have this vision of what we want for our families, and we act on it. And yes, and it's such a great feeling to not only have that support system, behind you, but also when you hear it from families. Oh my God, it brings so much joy to my heart, and it makes me, I say, you validate everything that we do, because we work really hard. And so when you have a family member or a parent come and say, thank you so much, you guys are amazing, I cannot tell you the growth that I've seen in my child, in X, Y, and Z. And it's like, just this huge sense of just relief, maybe, but at the same time, joy that parents are seeing this, and that hopefully we're starting to change the mentality. I think that's really, really big for me. The mentality of like having your child at a center, for instance. I talk about my sister, my sisters, how we can't seem to penetrate, this idea that this is good for your child. It is, they are in a place where they are loved and they're being stimulated, and so getting that response from parents, I think, just makes it all worth it.
Oh, that's so good. I am curious, as like you've built this and shifted your own career through the education space, like what were, if any like mindset shifts that you have had to make in yourself? Because you said like mindset is a huge part that you're trying to shift for the parents and like other people, but has there been something like limiting beliefs or other patterns and ideas that you've had to um, work through yourself as a Latina?
Well, I think one of the mindsets that I think that, well, that I've had to change is that you can't do it all. I used to think, like, when I started teaching, right, I was like, I will make a difference. And then you realize that you were part of a bigger system, right? And I think one of the ways I've had to shift my thinking is realizing that if I really want to make an impact in our community, in any community, you've got to spread. You've got to branch out, right? You can't do it all on your own. Like, I think that's what the biggest mindset, and I think I've still not struggled, but getting good at that is hard, like I maybe it's personality, like remembering that you've got to put your name out there, which is kind of like the business part of it, right? Like, here I am wanting to do all these great things, or here we are, the three sisters, wanting to do all these great things, but it's not feasible. We need support, and particularly in the field that we're in, right? We are not, um, daycare employees are not well paid. It's not like we say you're not going to be rich out of this industry, become rich out of this industry, right? But giving your community something that you're proud of requires you to branch out. And that has been a challenge. It's required us to change our mindset. I think another one is what we talked about early on, changing the mindset of like, yeah, I want our kids to succeed in school, but there are other things that come before that. And I think this age group in particular, it's always, you've got to remember there's more to it than what you're seeing, and changing that mindset from like, like, what am I seeing right now and what is that telling me? It's not that this child is purposely trying to be unruly or whatever it is, disruptive, or no, there's more to that. So changing the mindset of seeing beyond, or seeing beyond what is actually in front of you, and really researching a little bit, or asking more questions about what could possibly be going on here. Um, yeah, I think those are two the mindsets. And I think the third one would be the business. I elaborated, I kind of mentioned it at the beginning, but a business is a business. And it's not always fun, not when you are, you know, want to do good, or like you want to provide this space for parents. Well, yeah, but funding is important. And that is a difficult thing to kind of align with. How do you align all those things to kind of succeed and be able to do what you want? But you need fiscal, there's other things that go into the equation. So,
Those are amazing mindsets to like work through. I think in my own life, like that first one that you mentioned, knowing that you can't do it all, like I grew up thinking that I had to do it all. And my kids were young, and I remember like being proud that I could juggle everything. And it looked like it on the outside, but on the inside, I was like breaking down. And I had to like change my mindset and say, like, okay, I need help in these areas. And I'm going to outsource some things because I cannot be with the kids all the time. I can't take care of all the things that I need to in the home and run a business. Like it's too much. And I think yeah, it was one of those things that I had to work on, and I still have to work on it because yeah, it's my personality. Like I want to do everything. I want to say yes to everything. I want to support everyone. But I also have to recognize my limits and recognize my strengths. Like what do I have the capacity to do well, and what can I pass on to someone else or say like, "Oh, I think that this person would actually be a better fit to help you right now or to do this." Um so I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because sometimes we think that like when we're working through specific mindsets that we're doing it alone and that we're the only ones that are struggling with trying to um, shift patterns that we've grown up believing about ourselves, whether it's financially, whether it's mentally, whether it's about business or parenting or um, just life like as an adult. And it's encouraging to hear other people saying like, no, I'm working on the same things too. So I hope that listeners know that they are not alone in working through mindset shifts that were passed down from our parents or grandparents. um we're having to do the work, like as millennials we're doing a lot of work mentally to shift the narrative for the next generation.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And it's not easy, right? Um, so remembering to be patient with ourselves and to be loving in the process of it, because it is incredibly difficult to change some of these mindsets that you're right have been passed on to us from generations probably. So awareness is key, and you just keep at it and trying to change that pattern. So
Yeah, for sure. I think this is a good point to ask, like, what encouragement or advice do you have for the next generation of maybe like the next generation of educators that are wanting to get into the education space?
I think one of the best tips I can say is don't forget about yourself, right? If if you want to be able to fill this someone's cup with joy and support, you have to do the same for you. Um, I think about my experience and ultimately why I left the industry, and I probably wasn't doing it for me. And I look back now and I remember a principal who mentored me and said, Veronica, you worry me because I could see how hard you work and you're going to get burnt out. Which is probably what ended up happening. So I think that is one of the biggest advice that I have is fill your own cup, so that you can do the same for others, right? Because you can't do it if you're not taking care of you first. Um, and yeah, I think education is not an easy field. So the other piece of advice that I tell my teachers all the time is don't forget we are learning on the daily. You're never going to know it all. So be kind to yourself when things don't work out the way that you were hoping, you know, um, and learn from it. Um, we are lucky enough to um, be in an industry working with kids who give us kids by nature are just hopefully they're inclined to just be joy and carefree, full of joy and carefree. So like if it doesn't work out, you are still learning something and you are still surrounded by this beautiful energy. So don't be so hard on yourself, you know. There's always, I had someone, another teacher, or it might have been a principal who said, Veronica, if it doesn't work out the first time, you are in such a special situation that you can do the same thing the next day and change a few things and hopefully it'll go better. So that, I think those would be, and enjoy the process. You know, I've had old students of mine who have found me and have, I have a student right now who was one of my students working at the Little Scholars, and we talk about how intense I was. I was an intense teacher because I wanted to make sure that my kids were like challenged, and but like, was I enjoying the process and was I making it enjoyable to them? I don't know. You know, now I look back and I'm like, I could have had a little more fun with them and focused on, you know, building those relationships with them. So yeah, I think, and those would be some key things to keep in mind when going into this industry.
Oh my goodness. This whole conversation has been great. It's been so encouraging to me, and I know it's going to encourage the listeners. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, encouragement, advice, all the things. Um,
No, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
yeah, why don't you share where people can find you on social media?
Yeah, so you can find Little Scholars Club on Facebook under Little Scholars Club. And you can find our sister company on Facebook and on Instagram at La Pali Art Studio. Check us out if you are looking for a safe place for your child to just be stimulated and have fun. We may be the place. Or even if you're looking for a place to, you know, learn more. I know there's a lot of we hire a lot of students who are in school ready to get their teaching certificate. So if you're looking for a cool place to come and work with where you'll learn a lot and be supported, you can also definitely reach out.
Oh, that's great. I was going to ask, do you offer any virtual classes?
You know, not right now, we're not. But it we did do it during when the pandemic was full roaring at full speed. Right now we have, for our art studio, it's in person classes, but they're very small groups. And for Little Scholars, it definitely, all of it is like in person. But maybe something to think about, right?
Yeah, well, I'm thinking about my own kids, and I wish that I had some like a community, or I knew of little scholars when they were little. Like I wish that I would have known about it. Um, but I'm always looking for classes, especially art classes, for them to take. And it's our schedule is so busy, so I'm always like, is there a virtual option that I can just fit in, like in this 30 minutes that we have some free time or some downtime? So that's why I was asking. I know during the pandemic I took advantage of all of the online classes.
Yeah, no, which, you know, ended up working well. So it may be something for us to think about. Thanks for planting the seed.
Yeah. I know that it's especially like we're always in the homeschool community, like we're always like swapping resources, and if we find something online we're just like, oh, especially if it's like uh Latina led, and we can like have our kids be in a space where they are around other people that are like them and can relate to them, even speaking Spanish or Spanglish. They feel comfortable in those spaces. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and I will hope to meet in person. And
Yes, that would be fantastic.
Yes, for sure. All right. Thank you so much. And we'll talk later.
Thank you, Karina. Bye bye.
Bye. Veronica is such an inspiration to me. Her heart and passion for educating and pouring into kids with love is beautiful. Okay, amigos. Thank you so much for listening. There'll be a new episode every Tuesday, so after you listen, feel free to take a screenshot, post on Instagram, and tag at Elevating La Cultura. You can also comment on this YouTube video if you're watching online. I always like to hear from people and how they resonate with the stories that I share. So leave a review on Apple Podcasts so we can get more ears listening to these stories and we can continue elevating La Cultura. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day, afternoon, evening, whenever you're listening, y nos vemos next week. Bye.